welcome back to the deep dive. So today we're tackling something that, well, it seems incredibly simple at first glance.
Right.
But when you dig in, it actually reveals some pretty fascinating layers about how information gets structured, maybe even how we learn.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing a deep dive using excerpts from an English language learning podcast. The episode's called My Daily Routine.
That's right. So we've got this one source, and it just lays out a person's day, step by step.
And our mission here, it isn't just to list what they do. We really want to go beyond that.
Yeah, definitely.
We're going to break down how this routine is presented, the specific structure they're using, and sort of pull out the details and techniques that the source uses.
Exactly. We're basically using this description of, simple everyday life as a kind of case study to see how structure and content work together, especially, when the main goal is actually to teach something.
So we're looking at this detailed, sequential account of a day, but it's specifically made for language learners. How does that purpose shape the telling?
Yeah.
And what can we learn from it?
Right. What can we learn from that structure, the content? Maybe even find some surprising things about how we talk about our own lives. Let's unpack it.
Okay, so where does this routine pick off? Predictably, the morning. The source starts right at 7 a.m. And what jumped out at me right away is they admit they don't actually like waking up early.
Yeah, relatable.
Totally. But then they stress consistency because, quote, it helps me feel better.
See, that opening is quite clever, I think, from a teaching angle.
How so?
Well, they share something personal, even a bit negative, but immediately link it to a positive result from the routine itself.
Oh, right.
It makes it relatable straight away and frames the routine not just as tasks, but as something, beneficial. Kind of humanizes the teacher voice.
And the very first thing after waking up, making the bed.
Simple start.
Super simple, but the source is incredibly specific. It says it takes only 2 minutes.
That precision, yeah.
And they even explain why it makes the room look clean. And then, this is key, they directly tell the listener, try it.
Yeah, that only 2 minutes bit is important, I think. Makes it sound so achievable, low effort, right?
Totally.
But with a clear payoff, the room looks clean. And suggesting try it, that's like a gentle nudge for active participation, not just listening.
It's weaving in little calls to action right from the get-go. Smart pedagogy, like you said.
Exactly.
Okay, after the bed, it's the bathroom. Brush teeth, wash face, take a shower. Pretty standard stuff.
But they add a preference. Morning showers. Why? Because they help me feel fresh and awake.
And here we go again, another point of engagement. They ask the listener directly, do you shower in the morning or at night?
See that pattern? Personal detail. I like morning showers. Immediately flipped into a question for the listener to compare.
Keeps them involved.
Totally. This constant back and forth asking about your life, it turns what could be a dry description into more of a conversation starter.
Then off to the kitchen for breakfast. The options mentioned are really simple. Eggs and toast, or sometimes just a banana with tea.
Basic, clear vocabulary.
And again, they turn it back to the listener. What about you? What do you eat in the morning? Say it out loud now.
And that say it out loud now is very deliberate, isn't it?
Feels like it.
Yeah, it's prompting immediate verbal practice. It's a fundamental language learning technique. Use the new words or structures right away. It helps make them stick.
And the simple breakfast options give easy vocabulary to anchor that practice.
Spot on.
So the morning part wraps up with the transition to work or starting the day's main stuff. Source says, I usually leave the house at 8 a.m.
Okay.
And gives 2 possibilities. Start working at my desk if working from home, or take the bus if going to the office. Clear options.
So just looking at that first hour, roughly 7 to 8 a.m., it's actually quite structured.
Yeah, it really is.
They move chronologically, pin things to specific times, give simple actions, explain the why or the feeling behind them.
Constantly pull the listener in with questions and practice prompts.
Exactly. The routine itself becomes this really clear, predictable framework for all those teaching bits.
Okay, let's move into the main part of the day then, as the source describes it. Roughly 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., focused on work or school.
Right. The core day.
The person says they're an English teacher. First lesson around 9:00 a.m. They list typical tasks, checking emails, preparing materials, teaching. And there's another little personal touch. I really love teaching.
And that's where the personal story connects to the, let's say, functional language goal.
How do you mean?
Well, being a teacher gives a specific context, but the aim is clearly to provide language that works for any work or school day.
Ah, yeah, because right after that, they give a list titled Useful Phrases for Your Day at Work or School.
There it is.
Phrases like I start work at,
Mm-hmm.
I have lunch at,
Mm-hmm.
I finish work at,
Mm-hmm.
the standard time things.
Mm-hmm.
But also actions. I go to meetings, I take a break, I talk to my coworkers, I study in the library.
And crucially, they tell you to repeat them, right?
Yep, explicitly. Repeat these phrases.
Mm-hmm. So that list is really key. It shifts from just describing one person's day to giving the listener tools to talk about their own day.
The routine acts as a prompt generator.
Exactly. And the repetition isn't just busy work. It's about building automaticity, getting comfortable using these common work verbs and set structures. It's focused practice, but grounded in a natural context.
And they also weave in a cultural note here, which I thought was quite neat.
Oh, yeah? What was that?
In many English-speaking countries, people usually eat lunch between 12:00 and 1:00 p.m. Adds that it's often light, like a sandwich or a salad.
Okay, practical cultural info.
And guess what they do next?
Let me guess. Ask the listener about lunch in their country.
Bingo! Keeps that comparison engine running.
Yeah, that note does double duty, doesn't it? It gives relevant cultural context, which is, super important for language learners. But maybe more importantly, it's another chance to engage the listener by asking them to compare. Reinforces that language is tied to real life, real practices, real differences.
Using the routine as a hook for cultural stuff, too. Smart.
Very.
Okay, moving on. Let's look at the afternoon wind down and evening, starting from about 4 p.m. in the source.
Right. Post-work, pre-sleep.
There's a mention of an afternoon break around 3 or 4 p.m., maybe having coffee or tea sometimes with a little snack.
Just a small detail, but it acknowledges the day isn't just one solid block of work, gives you vocabulary for breaks, snacks.
True. Then after work finishes, which they put around 5 or 6 p.m., the source says it's time to relax.
Makes sense.
Activities mentioned include going for a walk or do some exercise, with a specific example, jogging in the park.
Uh-huh. And let me guess.
They ask about the listener's sports preference. You got it.
Huh. Consistent, isn't it? Present an activity, then ask the listener about their version.
It really is. But it's not just relaxation, right? They mix in practical tasks, too.
Yeah. What else do they cover?
Well, they mention, sometimes I go to the supermarket and buy groceries. Lists common things like vegetables, fruit, rice, pasta, and maybe some snacks.
Okay, so adding the essential vocab for daily chores. That's important.
And then dinner,
Yeah.
usually cooked at home, and they give a reason.
Which is?
I don't eat out often, it's expensive.
Very relatable, practical reason, feels authentic.
Doesn't it? And just like the work section, they provide another vocabulary list. Useful vocabulary for this part of the day.
Okay. What's on this one?
Things like go shopping, cook dinner, clean the kitchen, do the dishes, watch TV, read a book, call a friend, play a game. Evening activities.
Gotcha. Covering home life, chores, leisure, and I assume.
More repetition prompts, absolutely.
So this section really rounds out the day, covering personal time and domestic stuff. The routine gives the context, the lists give the language tools, and the prompts encourage practice.
It's very systematic. Identify the time block, list typical things, give the words, make the listener engage.
Exactly. Very structured approach.
Okay, finally, let's look at the night routine. The very end of the cycle, kicking in around 10:30 p.m., according to this source. The focus shifts to winding down.
Makes sense. How do they describe it?
They try not to use my phone too much, preferring to read or listen to music.
Good advice, generally.
Right. And they also mention, try to write in my journal just a few sentences about my day.
Ooh, I like that detail.
Okay.
Adds a bit of quiet reflection.
Yeah.
And of course, it subtly suggests a writing activity for the listener, linking back to the language practice.
Good point. The specific bedtime sequence is very clear. At around 10:30 p.m., I brush my teeth and go to bed. Simple.
Simple, but then they emphasize sleep, don't they?
They do. Sleep is important, is stated directly. They aim for 7-8 hours.
And the reason.
Because it helps me feel good the next day, connecting action to benefit again.
And connecting it back to the listener.
You know it. How many hours do you sleep each night? Always that prompt.
It's impressive how consistently they weave that interaction in. But the source doesn't just end there, right? There's a review.
Exactly. The very end of the episode, it includes a review section. It lists the key verbs from the whole routine. Wake up, brush teeth, eat breakfast, go to work school, take a break, cook dinner, go to bed.
So that's the pedagogical payoff. The whole routine, the narrative, It was really a vehicle to introduce and practice these core daily action verbs.
Seems like it. And they explicitly suggest making your own sentences and even give homework.
Homework, what kind?
Write your daily routine in English, just 5 to 10 sentences. Direct application.
Right. Taking what they learned and personalizing it.
And there's even a mention of a quick quiz format at the very, very end.
Yeah.
Like they say at time, 7:00 a.m.
And the listener should recall the activity. Make the bed.
Boy.
Or wake up.
Exactly. Quick recall practice.
This whole structure is, well, it's brilliant in its simplicity, really.
How so?
The day's narrative gives the context. The lists give the specific words and phrases. The questions force immediate interaction and comparison, and the end gives structured review and a clear task for application.
Yeah, it shows how you can take a really simple, everyday structure, the daily routine, and turn it into a powerful framework for learning and reinforcing language.
Definitely.
So wrapping up our deep dive into this one description of a daily routine from this learning source.
What did we really find? We saw how a seemingly mundane list of activities got transformed into, well, a highly structured teaching tool.
Yeah.
We saw the techniques, the timeline, the specific times, explaining the why, the vocabulary lists, the constant questions pulling the listener in, the review, the homework.
It's a simple structure, but it seems incredibly effective for organizing information and getting people to actively learn.
It really does.
It definitely highlights how even the most basic parts of our day can be broken down and used as a framework for communication, for understanding. It gives you the words, but also shows you how to build a narrative, even a really simple one.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe mull over. How does your actual daily routine compare to the one we just walked through from this source? But maybe more interestingly, thinking about how this routine was presented, with the specific times, the reasons given, the little calls to action. What does the way we choose to describe our own routines reveal?
Interesting question.
Yeah, what does it reveal about what we value or what we want to emphasize? Or even what we might want someone else to learn from us? If you had to lay out your day for someone, how would you structure it to make it clear or interesting or maybe even useful? Something to think about.